high-pressure water gun aimed at the girl. The powerful impact left her breathless, but the rich man looked at her with a sidelight, ignoring the girl's pleading. This was a full 5 hours. When it was over, the rich man had cooked dozens of dishes, but the girl clearly doesn't eat meat. But the rich man shoved the food into her mouth. If she doesn't finish it within 10 minutes, what awaits her will be even more cruel torture. In order to survive, the girl could only use her trembling hands, swallowed the food one by one. She thought the rich man could spare her, but this was only the beginning. Then Mike took her to the toilet. The girl was told to scrub every floor. Every 10 minutes, Mike would come to check. If the brush is not clean, she can only sleep in the toilet at night. Because of the long time soaked in water, the girl's hands began to fester, but she did not dare to stop for a moment. After brushing all night long, the girl walked outside weakly. When she saw the blinding sunlight, instantly had hope for life. But the rich man's next words once again made the girl feel desperate. From now on, you are my exclusive slave. You will be at my beck and call 24 hours a day. The girl thought that when she met the rich man, from then on she could live a happy life. But instead, she became the object of the rich man's hand. She walked numbly into the bathroom, took off her tattered clothes. After a brief grooming session, Mary finally changed into clean clothes. She didn't know what her life would be like, but now the only option. She had to follow the rich man's orders. What Mike never expected was that when Mary finished dressing up, she looked like a different person, but he didn't say much. Instead, he asked the butler to teach her manners. Mike's family is well known in the area, and they have a lot of money. So working as a maid in a mansion like this, there are strict requirements for all aspects, like keeping the pool clean at all times. Even a leaf is not allowed to change the towel. Throw them away after each use. Mike likes cleanliness very much, cannot tolerate a little stain. Then he taught Mary how to grind coffee by hand, to be so precise that even the grams cannot be wrong. And finally, lemon slices. The housekeeper thought it would take Mary a while to get used to it, but the seemingly clumsy Mary was very smart. She soon became familiar with all the work. However, while she was wandering around, she ran into Mike again, even though Mary tried not to make any mistakes. But Mike was still not nice to her. Then he dragged her into the bedroom alone. Don't think you know how to make coffee. You'll get a compliment every time you get the job done. Instead, I'll torture you slowly. You'll regret coming to this mansion. And with that, he turned and left, leaving Mary alone. She looked at the necklace in her hand. She couldn't stop the tears from falling. Obviously, she had a tragic story to tell. At that moment, Mike changed his attitude. He looked at the photo with his sister. His face was full of sadness. It turns out that Mike has two sisters. The second sister has been working as a doctor in Africa. Because the local medical care is very backward, she was very sympathetic to the people there, so she decided to go to Africa alone. But the conditions there are very difficult. Mike always wanted his sister to come back, but even though they tried to persuade her, second sister refused to go home. She thought she could find the value of life here, and she had many friends here. Coincidentally, Mary was one of them. Mary was always in the hands of the local mob. She was often beaten. In the process of treatment, the woman was sympathetic to Mary's plight. She treated her like a sister. She also gave Mary her necklace. But word of this soon reached the organization's boss. In a region where medical equipment is scarce, he decided to steal the medicine from the hospital, but he was discovered by a woman. In order to hide the news, the man actually used Mary to secretly poison the cake. At this point, Mary doesn't know what's going on, did not know that the cake had problems, and so a tragedy occurred. When Mike learned the news, the first time to go to Africa, he saw his sister's cold body. Now Mike is completely anxious. After learning what had happened, he found the local gangsters without saying anything and directly take action. Did not give the other side the opportunity to explain. After all that, his next target was Mary, even if Mary didn't know it. But in Mike's eyes, if Mary hadn't sent the cake, his sister would not have been in trouble. So he brought Mary back home. He imprisoned her in the mansion to take revenge, and Mary knew she felt guilty. She understood what Mike had done to her, but just as Mike was getting lost in his memories, there was a scream, and when he came out, he found his cousin ready to bully Mary. Mike didn't just watch. Instead, he threw up his arm and hit her. He coldly told his cousin that this woman was mine. No one but me can bully her. The slave who is worth only $5, but live in a mansion of 10,000 square feet, while other slaves kneel to brush their hair books. She was able to change into clean clothes, wakes up every day and makes a cup of hand-ground coffee 500 grams, no more, no less, and then she puts a lemon slice on it and deliver it to the owner of the mansion. Here she is responsible only to Mike, even in the plainest of clothes. Mary's elegance and beauty could not be hidden. Mike had a cousin who was not a good sport. He took an instant liking to Mary. He thought that if he waved his hand, Mary would jump into his arms, but he was met with strong resistance. He was even discovered by Mike. He even went so far as to teach his cousin a lesson for Mary. He even announced in front of everyone that in this mansion, no one can bully Mary except him. However, even though Mike stepped in time, but it still hurt Mary a lot. She kept thinking back to what she had just seen. Did she deserve this kind of humiliation just because she was from a lowly background? Did she deserve to be humiliated like that? She went to the bathroom alone. She washed every inch of her skin with great effort. Just then the maid brought a change of clothes. Mike had asked her to bring them. It was a bit of a surprise to Mary. When she was dressed, she found Mike alone, but when they were together, Mike reverted to his old attitude. I urge you you to forget about that scene. I'm not trying to protect you, although he knew what his cousin was like, but still deliberately said, don't think that just because you're pretty, you can use men to escape from the mansion. And that's exactly what hit Mary's bottom. She raised her arm to hit Mike, but Mike grabbed it with one hand. At that moment, they looked at each other. Mary had a fearless look in her eyes. I'd rather be your slave for the rest of my life to atone for my sins, than to use someone like your cousin. And then she left with a flourish. Mike was shocked by this statement. It seemed that what he had just said was a bit too much. Mary returned to her room in a daze. She hated herself for her incompetence. She knew she couldn't blame Mike for this. If she hadn't sent the poison cake in the first place, Mike's sister wouldn't have died of poisoning. But she did not know first. How else could this tragedy have happened? But she wasn't the only one who was torn. Mike's heart is also very difficult. On the one hand, he wanted to avenge his sister's death, but when he thought of Mary, who was so simple and kind, he was a little shaken in his heart. Mike did not tell his family. Mary was the cause of his sister's death, although Mike is outwardly tough, but what he did was to protect Mary. However, when his cousin did something wrong, he didn't look for his own faults. He thinks that Mike has always looked down on him. He even attacked him for a maid. With this in mind, he came to the mansion again, showing a grim expression. Then the door to Mary's room was slowly opened. This made Mary very nervous, but he had already made up his mind. If the man was still planning to bully her, she risked her life to protect her innocence. As he approached, Mary suddenly rose to resist, but she took a good look. She found that the man was actually Mike. Now Mary is confused. Mike, however, was very calm. He knew that he had just said too much, but he couldn't apologize to Mary directly. He took out the keys as if he didn't care. Then he told Mary, always lock the door when you go to bed. Then he turned around and left. This action made Mary a little touched. She rushed to catch up with Mike, trying to treat his wound. Interestingly enough, this time Mike did not get angry. He told Mary to go home and rest early. This wound is nothing to him, and he did it for his own reasons. He didn't want Mary to attract the attention of the family. This is also a kind of protection in disguise. But at that moment, Mike would not have thought his cousin had seen this scene. The girl often came to Mike's house and always had a crush on Mike. With the sudden appearance of Mary, a woman's intuition tells her Mary's origin is not so simple, but she did not directly point out. Instead, she watched in the dark. What a coincidence. The next day Mary brings Mike coffee, only to find him tending to his wounds alone. Mary is ready to help, but Mike refused. Don't think you're so close to me. Have you forgotten that you killed my sister? Put her in her place. These words left Mary unable to argue with him, but as she left the room, Anna bumped into her. This gave her a renewed sense of crisis. She knew that Mike's room was not for the faint of heart. She then asked, in an understanding manner, how did you sleep last night? But Mike was very indifferent to her. He didn't say anything about the injury. Before she left, Anna saw the gauze on the floor. She couldn't figure out, why did Mike keep defending Mary? Then she came to Mary's room. The first thing he said was, remember, you're just a lowly servant. Don't even think about getting into high society. Looking at Mary's aggrieved face, Anna was even more furious. Then she made a crazy decision, and sure enough, by noon, Mike was just about to go to the office, but the accident happened again. The maid just used the sidelight to look at, but the rich girl asked to kneel in public, and said that a lowly servant like you, not worthy to talk to such a good man like him. But in fact, she was jealous that the maid was prettier than her. And that's not all. The rich girl even called the police. She accused Mary of stealing from the mansion. She even beat the rich man to death, but to her surprise. But the rich man explained that it was just a misunderstanding, so she came out to protect Mary again. But this way of the rich girl, Mike felt very unhappy. I'll tell you one last time. In this mansion, no one can hurt Mary but me. This made the rich girl very sad. She was about to leave, but she was stopped. I hadn't finished my sentence. Anna saw this and tried to explain. Did all this for Mike. She thought Mary was a bad person, but Mike didn't care. He just said coldly, if I ever find out you're targeting Mary again, you'll end up with more than that. But the more Mike did this, the more he did, the more Anna became suspicious. And then she found Mike's mother, and blamed it all on Mary. That Mary would bring misfortune to the family. That's exactly what woke Ruth up. Since Mary came to the mansion, Mary had changed a lot. First, Mike had put his hands on his cousin, and now she was accusing Anna for her. Thinking about it, Ruth made a bold decision. Tell the housekeeper to get rid of her. But of all this, Mary didn't know anything about it. Without any precautions, she left with the housekeeper. He drove to the city, found a suitable location. He took out a sum of money. From now on, Mary was free. You can go anywhere you want, but don't go back to the mansion. Without waiting for Mary to say anything, he drove away. And this sudden freedom, Mary was a bit overwhelmed. She had grown up in Africa. The first time she came to a foreign country, in a city where she didn't know anyone, Mary didn't know where to go. Then she walked aimlessly. She happened to see a girl eating a snack, and Mary had been walking around all day. She was hungry. She looked at the food sold on the roadside. She hesitated to buy it, but she decided not to spend the money. But just as she was about to cross the street, but she was almost hit by a passing car. The driver was yelling at the car. Mary had to leave helplessly, and this incident made the driver become violent. He even threw his wife out of the car and made her walk home on foot, even though there were still dozens of kilometers to go. But the woman did not dare to say anything.